Recorder's on.
Okay.
It's just, now we're live.
So, I'd like to bring to order the special council meeting for March 12, 2019. Please join me in the pledge. No, it's just us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Roll call, I guess. Roll call.
Counselor Ward?
Here.
Counselor Colby? Here. Counselor Purnell?
Yes.
Counselor La Rochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Albert?
Here.
Counselor Lunt?
Here.
And Counselor Crawford?
He's not here today.
Do you want to make an announcement?
Yes. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and announce that Councilor Crawford has resigned his post effective immediately. Is there a motion to accept the resignation of Councilor Chris Crawford?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
Okay. So, when the council needs to call a special election on June 11th, 2019, using a shortened time frame, and I'm going to defer to my friend here.
I make a motion to adopt a notice of designated shortened procedure for nominating a candidate for electing a District 2 town council member, as provided in the charter, and to call for a special election on June 11th, 2019, to fill the vacant seat.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
Should we just get a quick explanation of time frame on that, just so if people are listening?
Sure.
I mean, I'm not sure if Tyler...
Oh, I do have it. Would you
Yeah.
like me to let you know? So the council has now designated tomorrow as the day that you can pick up nomination papers. You can circulate them, and the deadline to bring them back to our office will be by 4:30 on April the 19th. Then this vacant seat will be on your ballot for the June 11th primary.
Perfect.
Only District 2 people can nominate people, and only District 2 people will be able to vote on that ballot.
And that will be held at the...
Lisbon
regular-
High School, at our consolidated polling place.
Okay. So, moving on to the next item, we will need to nominate a new vice chairman, or vice chairperson, sorry. So, the floor is now open to accept nominations for the vice chair. Are there any nominations?
Cassie Colby.
I'll second that.
Half an hour meetings, I heard it.
Any other nominations at this point?
I don't think we need any paper.
All right, no paper necessary.
So let's just,
All those in favor?
yeah, I was going to say, all those in favor?
6-0. And
Yeah, there it
Cassie
is.
is elected.
Congratulations.
No pressure, kid.
Right?
I'm always up for a challenge.
All right. So where are we at now?
Next item,
Okay.
school budget presentation.
Hey, that's right on the end. All right, so I'm going to defer now to Dr. Green.
Good evening. Each of you should have a updated, or at least a cover letter of my overview of my presentation this evening for the Town Council, dated March 12th, 2019. You also should have received a copy of the subsidy and the cost center reports with a date at the bottom left and at the top center of March 11th, 2019. Those are the forms that was tentatively adopted by the school committee last night at their part of this process. There's always variables this time of year. There are some variables still remaining with our budget that can either positively or negatively impact those numbers. But again, I did include the updated subsidy comparison and cost center reports that will be that you can ask questions about this evening. Two of the primary variables that are included or that could impact this budget are legislation, and these changes, the two that we've been watching probably the most closely is the funding formula for Maine State Retirement, or referred to as Maine PERS whenever I've presented, and the removal of the service center penalties. Now, the Maine State Retirement in 2013, that was shifted, a percentage of the Maine State Retirement was shifted over to the property tax. And so right now, as included in this budget, the numbers that we have, it's roughly around $399,866 of our budget is the money that we have to pay the difference in the main PERS, and that increases each year. The other part of this budget that's new is that because we're not part of a service center, and we receive $90,000 less in revenue. So myself and others refer to it as a penalty for not being part of a service center. Now, for those that have attended or watched the school committee meetings, we did have an agreement that we worked with RSU 4, and we went through the whole process. We were going through legal, creating contracts and stuff. The issue was that at the time, these agreements, service center agreements, it was unknown whether or not you could ever get out of one. And so there's all this legislation surrounding that, and as a result, both school committees felt that giving up their local control and then being into another interlocal agreement was not in what anybody wanted. We do a lot of things with RSU4 that you may or may not be aware of. We do a lot of stuff with our day treatment program. I think they send us 6 or 7 kids, so it's saving them money. It's generating revenues for us. We do a lot with that we share. Well, we've contracted out with some of their staff. They've contracted out with ours. So there's between the two systems, and we're so close to one another. There's a lot of things that we can do back and forth, and so we really are doing what the intent of the law is. We're actually saving administrative costs and stuff. But the problem is that in order to get the credit or the service center credit, you have to be in the service center. Now, the Lisbon School Department is still having conversations with the Western Maine Educational Collaborative piece. There's a number of school systems in that group that are still looking at a service center, but agreement, which I would present to the school committee, and then we would present. It still has to be voted on. There's a lot of steps, but again, there is legislation to get rid of those penalties for the systems that are not part of that. But we are. We still do a lot of things. We felt, both RSU4 and the school committee felt that between the two of us working together, that we're probably saving the difference, the penalty amount. The issue is that instead of using those funds for something else, we're using them to offset the penalties in the administrative costs and stuff. So those are two big pieces of legislation that could impact this budget. There's a lot of other things. You may have heard the minimum teacher salary, $40,000, raising that to $40,000. We've looked at what that would be because you can't just raise the first level. You got to raise them all. And so we have calculated, or we have put together, we sent to our local representative the numbers, or the senator had contacted us in regard to what that impact would be. So we did send them the figures because it's more than just the 3 or 4 new staff that we hire that would be on that first level. It's the fact that our second and third levels would get paid less than the first, and so you have to raise them all up. So it's a pretty big cost. But again, there's that legislation. There's lots of legislation out there. There's collective bargaining legislation that could impact what we can and cannot negotiate. Right now, educational policy is something we're not required to negotiate, but they're trying to get certain things in there, class sizes, plan, and all that stuff in there, which it's included in, a lot of it's included in our contract already. But we also don't really approach that language unless we have to, and it's a given. Like if we change that language, it's usually a big financial impact or something else. So anyway, those are some legislation that's out there that we have to continue to watch, and that could change at any minute. I know that they're up there meeting almost daily, and so if any of that changes between now and when you are presented with the budget to vote on, to send to the voters, we would make those changes accordingly. The budget, the school committee's primary goal is to maintain all of our programs and services. This particular budget does that. Also included in this budget are some staffing increases with our day treatment, with our Gartley Street day treatment program and our alternative ed program. The Gartley Street program, the day treatment program, we actually have the teaching position already. What happened was we had an Ed Tech 3 who finished their degree, and instead of losing them to another district, we actually hired them as a teacher, And so the cost, whatever it was, 20,000 or something like that, I can't remember what the increase was. So that position is actually in the budget now. It's just not, so it's not like a new full 60 or 75, whatever you budget, whatever we, I think it's 50 plus insurance. So that position's in there. It's 2 ed techs. And what that would allow us to do is to expand, because we are almost at capacity right now with our day treatment. And we had inquiries from RSU 5 and Topsom, I believe, and Lewiston about sending some more kids over here. That just opens up, the capacity or increase our capacity by 15 students. So if they're not our students and they're out of district, then that money is well spent. The revenues per day that can be anywhere between $175 and $225 per student per day. So it pays for itself. So and that helped day treatment. As far as the alternative program goes, we have a small percentage of students, 9th and 10th grade, who really are struggling in a regular school setting. And we literally have students who are sophomores who have all but given up. And I hate to use that word, but they because they can't get into Gartley Street until they're juniors. And so if we had the option of 9th and 10th grade program, those students, it would look different. It would be a full day program, but there's a small number of students, 9th and 10th grade, who would definitely benefit from the same type of programming that we offer the 11th and 12th graders. But there's at least 1 or 2 students out there now that are just basically waiting for next year so that they can start Gartley. So if we could start them early, they'd get 3 or 4 more credits and they'd be able to graduate. And the program has been successful overall. And it's the cost of adding basically an Ed Tech 3, which probably would be internal, and then we'd have to hire some people outside to cover their position. As always, I share with you the other areas, potential cost savings and costs. One is the anticipated or actual resignations. That changes daily. We have resignations as late as August. Some we know about, some we don't know about. As far as retirements go, the deadline for them to notify me if they had 20 years in the system is March 1st. But if somebody's retiring, if somebody's been in the system for less than 20 years, or they don't have the sick days to turn in as a retirement compensation, then they don't have to notify me until August. So I don't know if there's going to be others, but at this point there's only been one that has submitted their retirement notification to us prior to March 1st. And we have had a lot of retirements over the last 3 years. I'd say there's been between 10 and 15. So it's no surprise to me right now that we only have 1 or 2 people that are at that point, because that's a lot of turnover. Some of the departments at the high school, almost like 75% of the high school, or over 50%, closer to 75, have been there less than 5 years. And so that's not historically what's been. Usually we had 3 staff members leave the high school, retire from high school last year. 2 of them had close to 40 years experience each in the building. So so you never know with retirements. The use of the capital reserve, we have an amount that we use to help offset the cost of the performance contracts. Career and technical, the funding for career and technical was changed. And so what happens is we were normally invoiced for our students that went to like Region 10. However, the funding formula changed, so the state sends the regional centers their money directly. However, as I mentioned to the school committee, in the next 3 years or so, when the new Edward Little High School is built and the Voc Center gets upgraded, there's probably room for 4 or 5 programs at the new high school. What we're concerned, the outside schools are concerned with, is that there's nothing in legislation or in the law that says that they can't just send us tuition, additional tuition. So if they created 5 new programs, they could divide the cost and send it to each of us, break it up, and send each of the other schools the cost. So that's a line that we did zero out for this year, but it's a line that in the future the school committee and council need to be aware of, that we could get this, we could get a bill. I know that some private schools, in systems where there's a private school, there's not a high school, but there's a private school, they just send out tuition, and there's no really regulating what those numbers are, and they go up depending on their cost. So I just want to make you aware of that. The LESP, which is our support staff, we finished negotiations. Actually, Tracy just signed the new agreement, so we have a new 3-year agreement with them. And those numbers have been adjusted. That's one of the reasons why the numbers went down from the original amounts. Main PERS I already talked about. That's in legislation. Restructuring, that occurs when we have resignations. We have a lot of unique positions where some people fit that position. We have a director position that's open, but that was kind of a mesh of special ed and curriculum. So whenever we have resignations and stuff, we try to look at what our options are and what we have internally and how we can fill and do things. So that'll be ongoing. The majority of our budget, over 70% of our budget, is salaries and benefits. And then insurance is budgeted at 9%. Now we've had the last couple of years, we have some very low percentages for insurance. I think it was point something one year and it was 3% or something the other year. I'm expecting a big hit. I don't know about you, but I know that my insurances have all gone up, and when I called and asked what was going on, they've all said because of all the natural disasters and stuff that are going around, insurance and stuff in general is going up. We've had a number of staff who have been dealing with some medical issues that are, big-time medical issues. So I'm hoping 9% is enough. Most of the time they'll cap it at a certain number, and I don't think it's ever been higher than 9%, but I just want you to be prepared that usually there's savings there, and there's been savings in there because we budgeted 9% every year. I don't anticipate that being the case this year, but I could be wrong. The service center penalty I've already talked about. Special education, you never know with special education. You could have students enroll, you could have students leave. The numbers fluctuate, and we're really honestly, with the economy is going as good as it is right now, we're having a really hard time finding people, ed techs in particular, to work. We're still short 3 or 4 ed techs, and so that's impacting programming. But any time that we have students in and out, that causes a budget increase and decrease. The unassigned amount, generally we build a budget. One of my big concerns with that is that we're using, when we had the mandated cut, 4 years ago, whatever it was, and both the town and the school, we increased our unassigned, the amount that we used from our unassigned to build the budget, and it went from like 100 and something thousand up to 190,000. Now, one of the things that, for me, and what people had shared is that if we were using that amount of money to build a budget, then if we didn't ask for that amount, or we didn't need that amount, then we shouldn't be collecting it through taxes. And so one of the things that I talked to the board about last night is that's a number. So if there's any changes in some of this legislation, what I would recommend to the school committee and to you is that you lower that unassigned amount, because what that means is that you have to have over almost $200,000 left over in your budget in order to start the next year's budget. And that's just I know when I first took over, it was a lot higher than that. I want to say it was 300 or 400, but it's just a number that I know that in the town I live in, they build theirs on almost $750,000. So in my opinion, they're asking for $750,000 too much if they have to hold that over to build. So anyway, we're not at that extreme, but I still think 190 is a lot more than 100,000 or so, and that's something that we would look at reducing, because those funds, the unassigned amount, is the money that we send into our capital reserve, and so we can do phone systems and things like that. We come to you for approval, but instead of adding those to a budget, $50,000 phone system, we can use our capital reserve, and that's it. I'd rather do that than have it be that low-hanging fruit out there when you have a budget and they want to cut. The one thing that they'll look at is your infrastructure, and you, everyone there should know, cutting your infrastructure funds is not in the best interest of what you want to do long term. Unanticipated revenue, we're doing our own billing for Gartley Street this year, and so the numbers, we're not paying the high percentage that we were to the billing company, so we're hoping those revenues. So we did increase. If you look at our subsidy, you will see that we did increase our numbers by about $30,000 increased in revenue. Notable increases, decreases, and transfers. The biggest one is through our advice from the auditors, and that is they wanted us to move our nutrition funds out to the 600 account, which is separate from this budget. And so what happens is there's $400-something thousand that has to be raised locally, or has to be raised through sales, and then we built in $200,000 into our budget to cover the difference. because what the auditor had said is that we've been operating in about $170,000, $180,000 in the hole each year. Now, one thing to know about that is that puts a lot of pressure on generating revenue for the director, and there's legislation out there in regard to food shaming. I don't know if you've seen it, but what that says is that if you don't deny kids any lunches or whatever, regardless of how much money they owe, and so you don't shame a kid or do whatever. We have good systems in place, and generally when they get to the high school, they don't get in line if they owe money or whatever, or they bring in their own funds and stuff. We don't have as many issues at the high school, but legislation like that would basically just, it would be, nobody would have to pay, and there's nothing we could really do about it. So we need to watch that, because generating that kind of revenue, I have full confidence that she will be able to continue to do that, but there's little things if prices go up or whatever, raising lunch by 10 cents a person doesn't cover, the big expenses. Day treatment, I already talked a little bit about that the teacher's in there. It's just an additional ed tech. Alternative ed is an additional ed tech. And then purchase services and supplies, we actually, for our repairs, we increased those lines. Those, to the best of my knowledge, haven't been increased in 17 years. And so we increased that by 10%, which is the equivalent for the repairs, purchase services, it's the equivalent of about $2,500, almost $2,600. And then in supplies in the schools, it's about $5,663, which doesn't seem like a lot in the grand scheme of a $16 million budget, but at the schools, $1,000 or $2,000 more in supplies for students is a big deal. So to summarize the budget that we'll look, if you have questions about the subsidy reports, the current budget for this year has an increase of $492,374, which is down from the February amount, with an increase in taxes of $376,761. And again, that was down from our February numbers. I'm not sure if the subsidy comparison report is the one that most people are interested in, but there's also the cost center. So if you look at either of those sheets and you have any questions, but the majority of this budget, if you look at the individual sheets, you'll find that we did move some stuff around. For instance, technology services or technology purchase services and stuff, we moved that into general supplies. It's a lot easier just to say that a light bulb for a projector is supplies versus technology or purchase services technology. So we did, it was $100 here, moved there, and Haley tried to put arrows throughout all the budgets that were presented to you and presented to the community, so if people had any questions, they could ask. But the majority of our budget increases, it's all salaries and benefits, and that's historically what drives our costs. Any questions?
You had mentioned the capital account. What do you actually have in that now? Is that built up at all, or?
The capital reserve?
Yeah.
I think there's a little over 30,000 in there right now because we added 50,000 for the phone systems at LCS, and so we don't tend to build that up. We tend to just put in what we need and then get approval and then use it.
Yeah. You had mentioned the idea some of that comes over from the other funding.
The unassigned, yeah, we transfer it from the unassigned. I think there's enough money in there to do. There's conversations. I'm waiting to hear back when the next planning team meeting is, but I want to have a facilities committee meeting because one of the things we want to do is provide an update on the field lights because I think there's like 3 stages to that. I think we can do one of the stages, but with using the capital reserve, and then also give everybody an update on where we are with the Performing Arts Center.
So when you actually, and again, it's been a while since I looked at one of these, anticipated revenue for the capital reserve fund, the $39,768, is that actually funding that you would get in this year's budget? Is that, it's actually on your...
Yeah, it would be built. Yeah, there's that would be what's built into, it's 43, let's see, capital reserve. It's actually 43,209 is what we anticipate using this year.
And that would just be tagged on to the other 30,000 you have now, so,
No,
No,
we would
that-
we
that
would just add 10,000 and then use that.
okay, I get
We
you.
don't tend to build that.
Okay,
We've never held a high
Yeah.
balance in there.
it's usually the go-to fund if you need something, so that's,
Well, it's when you're buying equipment and stuff, it's a lot easier to use that for repairs and renovations. One of the things we'll look at is the bathrooms at the high school. We want to redo the bathrooms, things like that. It's so much easier to use those funds because it's already been raised through taxes, and you don't have to add it to a budget, because you add $50,000 for a phone system in any of these lines, and it's going to really jump out.
Is it reasonable, probably that's not the right word, but the expectation that it's quite possible with the legislation in place to pull back that main PERS money that communities have been saddled with, is it reasonable to think that that's, and I don't know the legislation, we're talking about the whole dollar amount, or are they talking about a portion of that?
The way it's been explained to me, and I have a regional meeting tomorrow that we're talking about the new teacher salaries and things like that. But the way it's been explained to me is that they were going to pull that all out and take it off property taxes and move it back into wherever they paid for it before.
So, in theory, that could take a big bite out of what the anticipated increase to taxpayers would be.
but it sounds like there's a balancing of that, because
Well, it's gonna go off your property taxes, but then they could increase sales tax. That's
I'm sure it's what, trading, yeah, I understand.
But it would make for a much easier conversation with me and you in May
But
if we took 400,000 off
Yes,
it.
yes.
what you just mentioned, though, if part of that's a balancing act with the idea of increasing the base salary for a teacher, are those even compare compatible as far as what we would
I haven't
actually
really
lose
looked. I haven't looked
versus
closer.
gain?
I
To
haven't
me, it may
really-
not be a wash. It may be a lopsided number, but
It wouldn't be 300,000. I think it's closer to 90.
okay. Yeah.
So that's pretty safe.
Yeah.
All right. Tracy says 128. I thought it was 90, but that's a difficult one to predict because I don't know how many teachers fall in whichever the new teacher level. Last year we had 6, but we only had 1 retirement this year, so next year it could be 1. And then we don't hire people just because they're new. We try to hire the best people available. So if they have 1 year, or 0 years, or 30 years, it doesn't matter.
So to get back to that, then, even if, and we're talking about a lot of ifs here, but if that $400,000 is pulled out of the local, and then the teacher salaries, because it's a forced increase, then if that happens, once that reset happens, then we're back to bound by the union negotiations and moving salaries based on that, right?
If both of those legislations, if I'm understanding you correctly, yes, we would. Well, no, we would have to go in and state law trumps contracts.
Yep.
The issue is that the state law only addresses the first year salaries. So I think what they would do is it would cause,
Immediate renegotiation.
Probably, yep.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
If it's not,
They're not
we're
big
talking
on
about dominoes is where I'm looking at this. If not only do we have to do the new teachers' salaries and then do a marked increase for the first couple tiers after that to make sure there's equity, but then not knowing if this is going to trigger another contract negotiation, which of course.
But we would have to want to go to the table for that.
Right.
And they would have to want to go to the table. Generally, most in the years I've been doing this, the association, they don't usually like to open the contract once they get going because it opens everything.
Well, that's fine. I mean,
Right.
so there will be an opportunity then for the.
More than likely, they'll want to negotiate it because what will happen is that whoever's first year is going to be making more than somebody with 6 years experience.
Right.
And it's not gonna go over well.
But then
Kind of the minimum wage
that's going to
thing,
hit
right?
that's going to hit our bottom line though.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. Oh yeah, it would. It would. It just, again, if we only have 1, then you're talking $3,000. Right. It's not that one. It's the impact that 15-something% or whatever it is per level causes.
The domino.
Okay, that's what I got for some questions so far. This is a preliminary leaping off spot, of course, with all these things in play.
I think we're in better shape than we been in. I think some of the budgets I presented to you in March have been in the 800,000 range, if I remember correctly. So we're right at. I mean, till last year we used to think that it was just 250, but it's really our operation, our just alone salaries and benefits alone are closer to 450.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The where is the school with like the bus replacement? Is that I didn't see anything listed on
Yep,
this.
there's three bus.
There is three.
It's a wash because what happened? Well, it's almost a wash. We haven't received the quotes yet for new buses. We were approved for 3, but we just had 3 go off. So we're going to be able to just add 3 more buses and then utilize the lease purchase money for that. And it probably, one of them was the big bus. So we're hoping that one's going to offset the increases in the cost in the other buses. So it would be pretty much a wash or be a little bit of an increase, but we've until we get the quotes from the bus companies, we're not sure what that is. But that in this budget is 3 buses, but you don't see it as a big increase because it's a
wash.
3-year ending and we're adding 3, which is a good cycle. I mean, we don't want to get into I think one year we had to order 5 or 6 buses. And the salt. I mean, you know as well as we do, the salt doesn't do.
Yeah, there's some
doesn't
pretty
do
old buses
justice.
to run.
Well, you know them better than anyone.
Pretty old buses. That's what I was just wondering if you're staying ahead of that curve. That's all, because that's a.
Yep.
And the do you have many more coming up in the next few years that this is going to be able to keep rotating like that?
Three new ones will put us in. I mean, if you're talking to me, 3 new ones will put us in pretty good shape. If you're talking to Alan, then he'll want. He'd say there's 2 or 3 more coming next year and 2 more the next year. I don't think I've ever had a facilities director that didn't want new equipment.
Exactly.
Correct. But coming off, I think we might have 1 or 2 in the next year or 2. But that even if they qualify, it doesn't. If there's 100 bus requests during that year, they're going to take the worst ones, the ones with the highest mileage, and the oldest, and they're going to give those priority. So we've had years when we've had all our buses approved. The next year we put in the same buses because we didn't have money to buy them. The next year we put in the same buses, and even though they were qualified, they weren't approved because there wasn't enough money in the bus. So this year we have 3. They were approved, and we're moving forward hopefully with that purchase.
That's good. We'll keep moving, helping bring the fleet up a little bit, maybe
Yep.
as far as year-wise, right?
Yep.
The current student body population has remained pretty flat.
Yeah,
for
right
the
around
most part.
1280-ish, a little over. Our numbers at the middle school have gone up in the last couple of years, and then the high school has gone down, and then elementary or the community school has been right at those numbers. Yeah, we're actually our increase. If you look at the state subsidy, it went up 192,000. That's a direct result of our enrollment. Whereas I know RC4 lost a number of kids, and so their budget they lost 300. Okay. So our numbers have been right there.
Special ed, is that still on the incline?
Yep, special ed is up. I think the state they want us at 15%, and we're at 18.
How much of that is Gartley counted for, or is that the lion's share of it?
It's included, but it's not. I mean, it's not the reason why it's higher. We just have we have students with a lot more socio emotional issues. The family lives have changed. Family, structures have changed significantly. So we're dealing with a lot of kids with anxiety. And it's just a matter of, providing interventions, trying to do interventions to help kids get caught up. We're definitely faced with a lot of different challenges. Even in the 10 years I've been superintendent, it's changed significantly.
Anybody else have anything?
No, sir.
Thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We'll see you again, I'm sure. See you again soon, I'm sure.
Anybody else got anything? Make a motion to adjourn. Oh, still on the break.
So right now we have all the budget workshops scheduled at 7 o'clock. Do you want to leave it at 7 or do you want to change it to 6?
I would love to roll it back to 6, but let's just see what everybody else feels about that.
I think in the nature of the nights that it actually hits, I would make that recommendation rather than just hold people hostage here for another night.
By starting at 6, I'd also like to get everybody's thoughts on, I think we should cap
Absolutely.
these budget meetings. I think going 3.5 hours on a particular topic is Usually after 1 hour, you're going to lose people. I'm A-okay with 2 hours because some of this content we need to get through before we have to vote on this. So that's where I'm landing. I'm in favor of capping at 2 hours. Thoughts?
What I've seen in that to be able to facilitate that is if you wanted, you could actually request the questions be asked in advance and staff could just present the answers and that would expedite.
I agree with you there. I know that Diane's first pass to vet the budget's initial, which in years past we had done the first whack right here in the meetings. Diane's done the
Right.
first whack with their department heads already. So the hope would be that coupled with your suggestion, when they come in here, we have everything that we need queued up to be able to ask make informed decisions, maybe ask some follow-up questions via the email so we're not wasting a ton of time on that. So I'm a big fan of it. Just thoughts, everybody else, what are you guys thinking?
The one thing we're going to do this year too is we're just going to touch on the large changes. We're not going to go line by line by line. We don't need to. We put enough detail in the explanations if you read those. So we're going to touch on the highlights this year.
And if somebody works line by line by line and that's the way they like to work, no problem. Just fire your questions away in the email format to Diane, so that when we do the overview, you got your answer before we do a vote.
There are still departments that seem to hit certain accounts that budget 3 to 5% over last year because it's not going to trigger. That is a sore subject to me if it isn't any rationalization for why they're doing it. So that said, it won't be popular because I look at in that it leads to creep in a budget. If you had $100 last year and you haven't used that $100 in the last 3 years, why the hell are you budgeted $125 this year? The budget continually comes up, and those are the controllable costs when 60%, 70%, to Rick's statistics, are staff, time, and benefits. Don't waste my time on the other 30% bullshit with that kind of approach put into a budget. That's my one takeaway. And there are departments that I still know do that on certain key lines.
So expect plenty of emails? Fun reading?
Correct.
Okay.
So long gone are the days of death by 1,000 cuts, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Some of that
We can hope.
insomnia will be fulfilled.
It may be 20 minutes her reading through my request, yes. But at least they will be in advance. Yeah, I will do my part.
You're going to break in the new email this year. That's good.
Yes. The one piece that I would offer, and I bring it tonight, I would have brought it next week. There is legislation for bond funding at the state level to the tune of $25 million that's looking to be on the November referendum for investment in firehouses. If there's any traction associated with this in the coming years, we need to get our ducks in a row. And you might want to have a conversation with our fire chief to see if there's a need locally to be able to be discussing that, so we're not losing to some other community that's got their act more together. Let's leave it at that.
Great.
What's the LD on that?
48 something.
47.
47.
47?
You can have this that I'm looking at right here. I just took it off ours because our finance committee discussed it last night, and I figured I'd bring it to our attention because I know we have the need as well, too. Now, that said, hearing all of this, they've, at the state level, have done certain things for roads, they've done things for culverts, they've done a few for schools and that kind of stuff, but it's been long and far in between for municipal infrastructure of something of like fire. The intent is if this one actually comes through, you may see more coming in the future because there is a specific need. So even if it's not successful with this go around, the second wave of it, for sure, we want to get our act together. Because I know Lewison's looking at putting in 3 substations in 6 years. They're already all over the money. Because the fact is, if there's anything on that takes the relief off that community, you can guarantee other communities are looking at this as well.
Great. So before we button this thing up, I just want to take a moment and thank Lisbon EMS, Lisbon Fire, and Lisbon Police. When I had an accident a couple weeks ago, their response was incredible. They're just great professional folks, and they didn't point and laugh too hard when they found out it was me, which was nice. I appreciated that. Also, special shout out to Steve Avioli, right in front of his house, and he came out and he's like, "Norm, are you okay?" So, Steve, thank you, brother. I am okay.
Get off my lawn.
Make a motion to adjourn. I'm going to pull that back again.
If anybody has any interest, tomorrow night, here or next door, the Lisbon Development Committee, we're going to be doing a meeting, and we do any kind of a presentation on the some proposals for the Graziano Square, some pretty neat stuff. So tomorrow night, 6 o'clock here. It's you'll be seeing it again, I'm sure, but actually, if you want to see it kind of as it gets rolled out and listen to the discussion, we'll just try and get things going so we can make something good happen this year in that area. So neat stuff.
That's awesome. Anyone else?
Thank
Make
you.
a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Order passed 6-0.
Thanks all.
Thanks so much for coming out.
That's not bad, Norman, 40 minutes.
I can live with that.
And he talked 15 minutes of it, so he can cut it back. It happened already.
Again, I'm not sure if you want to pass that down to Diane along with this, in case they want it, Twyla.